Okay, am I recording? Yes. Okay, so just a reasonably quick one with queen and pawn endings. Um, they're fairly rare, and you'll frequently find that queen and pawn endings are drawn because of perpetual check. So when there's very little space for a king to hide, you will often find that there's a thing called perpetual check. And what will happen is if one side thinks that they're losing, or is quite happy with a draw, they'll try to aim for a situation where they literally just do nothing but check the enemy king. And remember, if you go 50 moves each, without either a pawn move or a capture, then the game is actually a draw in the rules. The person, one of the players, can claim a draw at that point. So if you're losing, you can just keep check, 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 and you may well get away with a draw. There's also a couple of other standard positions just to try and remember with queens and pawns in the ending. What else to say? The powerful queen can often attack 2, 3, or even more pawns at once. Yeah, absolutely. You have to watch out for queen forks because, of course, she is such a long-range piece with diagonals and straight lines. Really, really dangerous. But anyway, let's just have a quick look. So I'm not going to spend hours on it. So here's a position that is interesting. So white's a queen for a pawn up, but actually isn't necessarily winning here. It depends on whose move it is. So if black is to move, then f2, moving the pawn close to the queening square, and there's really nothing white's going to be able to do to stop black promoting that pawn. Whereas if white's moving first, then queen to g1 check, and then just play queen f2 next move, and the black king is unable to get the queen out of the way. So just be a little careful that as powerful as the queen is, if there's an enemy pawn really close to the queening square, to the promotion square, it may well be that even Her Majesty can't stop the pawn from promoting. So again, have a quick look at that one. If it's black to move first, it's going to be very, very much a draw because white will not be able to stop the pawn promoting. White to win first, queen g1 wins. This one here is a surprising draw. It's well worth remembering. Now, if you recall when we were doing check and checkmates, there's a particular position where a queen on her own can stalemate the king. And what actually happens is that's the case in this position. So black would play queen to b6, assuming that white's going to play king c8, and that gets in the way of the pawn. And black would then, as the procedure would be, to bring the king up, so to win the pawn that way. But actually, white's reply would be king to a8. I'm just going to put the put the arrow on here. So queen to b6 check, king to a8, lots of exclamation marks. And the black queen cannot take the pawn. Well, she can, but if she did, it would be stalemate because the king in the corner would have no legal move. So well worth remembering that a queen and a king in those positions, if it's the king to move, it's stalemate. And of course, sorry, yeah, I should just say in that position, if black moves the queen away instead of taking the pawn, white just puts the king back to b8. And we go again, it's the same thing. So yeah, interesting, a draw. So here's the perpetual check. So white obviously is losing on the face of it here. There's two big passed pawns down here, but the black queen is cut off from the action. She's blocked out of it by her own soldiers. And so what white would do here is, instead of trying to win the game, white would just go for perpetual check. So queen to c8 check, the king would have to go to h7, queen to f5 check, and the king would go to g8, and then queen to e6 check, and king to f8, and the queen might go to f5 check, and so on and so on and so on. There's just nothing black can ever do to get his king away from being checked by the white queen. Even if we tried queen c8, king to h7, queen f5, played g6 won't work because then queen to f7, and all that's going to happen, you just see the arrow, is the black king and the white queen will just bounce around in the corner. until we reach the 50 move rule. So if you are losing a game of chess and you can find a way to do perpetual check, it's a really handy way to get away with a draw when you should be losing. Just keep an eye out for perpetual check. Looks like we've got one here where it won't work. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a little look here. So queen to b1 check. So black is gonna, this is a bit like the position above, but black's about to be 2 pawns up. King has to go to h2, queen takes a2. And now if white plays queen e8, king g7, queen e5, f6, queen to e7. This time, because the black queen is not blocked by her own men, queen to f7 will actually win the game, because there's no more checks for white, and these 2 pawns will eventually get promoted. It will take black some time to do it, but eventually with care, black will promote and get a second queen. And it's worth remembering, of course, that you can have as many queens as you like. There's a wonderful game that you can find it on YouTube somewhere where you end up with a position where there's sort of 6, 7, 8 queens on the board. It's absolutely crazy stuff. Well worth a look for a giggle. But yeah, technically you could end up with 9 queens. So you could have the one you start with, and you could promote all 8 pawns and end up with 9 queens. So the mobility of the queen, combining those of the rook and bishop, makes her lethal for hoovering up pawns. So no matter who is to move here, a pawn is going to be lost to a queen check. So if white goes first, queen to c8 is check, and when the king moves, queen takes b7, just wins a pawn. For black, queen to b1 check, and then queen takes b2. And of course, it's a made-up position. There's always the danger of perpetual check, and I'm sure there's possibilities. But the point is, just watch out for the queen being able to fork kings and pawns, because the mobility is so dangerous. Put the black line across the middle of the board here, so we'll just pretend for a minute that the 2 queens can't capture each other. It's worth remembering that the queen has the ability to do back rank checkmate. So here is checkmate because the king is blocked by his own foot soldiers, and down here, because the queen does diagonal moves as well, you actually have a checkmate here, even though there's only 2 pawns blocking in the king. So well worth remembering that little ability for the queen as well. But again, once again, there's so much you can look up on just Queen and Pawn endgames books and videos and what have you. This is nothing more than a quick introduction. Best way to get some experience, of course, is to study some of those books or to play them yourself. So once again, Pawn Wars with the Queen. Think about, you can roll a dice, add a couple to the score, see how many pawns you're going to get and which starting squares you're going to place them on. And yeah, just have a practice. Watch out for perpetual checks, watch out for back rank mates, and watch out for the queen being able to fork the pawns, and particularly being able to fork the king and pawns. Awesome. Okay, that will do for now. Good luck.